For decades, buying a silencer has been difficult. But in 2005, Silencer Central set out to simplify the suppressor buying process. So whether you're planning your next hunt or putting together a range day, you'll enjoy every shot you take with Silencer Central, straight to your front door.
All right.
Let's do it.
Well, damn, dude, we did it.
We went duck hunting.
It was awesome, man. I appreciate, it's hard because there was so much that took place, and it was almost overwhelming in a sense because it happened so fast.
Yeah.
But also when we came off, when we get there at 10,
Yep.
when we got done 2-ish, almost 3, I couldn't believe how fast the time went.
Yeah, because, I mean, from the moment we got in the blind, I rushed everybody in the blind, right?
Yeah.
From the moment we got in the blind, it was birds flying.
It was crazy.
Because we had one flock show up while we're kind of, we're piddling around, right? Like digging around in our bags and like getting kind of situated. And it's like, nope. And it was hot from the start.
It was, man. I want, like, selfishly, the idea of me getting into duck hunting was inspired by kind of what you already preach: conservation, independence, self-reliance.
Yeah.
And when I had reached out to a couple guys in the industry and said, hey, who's the guy? And everyone's like, Sean Weaver's the guy. Like, that's it. And it wasn't even like there was like a second and third, or like, hit this dude up, and then if he don't work, hit this dude up. It was like, there's only one dude who knows this world, and it was you. For the audience and people who are listening, in the context of, being a duck expert, can you give us a background of your like upbringing and how you got into it?
Yeah, man. I started going with my dad, which, looking back on it and like having met a lot of adult onset hunters in life, even yourself, right? Like, This is your first duck hunt.
Yep.
Having met so many adult onset hunters now and brought so many people on their first duck hunts now, I realized how freaking lucky I was to have a dad that, like, from the age of 9 was taking me out there to duck hunt,
So awesome.
And shot my first duck at 12. And, in high school, we had a duck boat, like similar to the duck boat we were on today. And my dad let my best friend and I take that all over hunting.
Mm.
Like, even if he couldn't go, even if he was working, I was like, well, go ahead. And he just kind of gave us free reins. It meant we weren't boozing and whatever else, right? We were out duck hunting. So it was a win-win for a parent. And he gave us the freedom to just run hog wild with duck hunting. And, I mean, we were traveling to other states by the time we graduated high school to go duck hunting. And I was just ate up with it. When I was 13, I got to go on a hunt that was, big flocks of ducks like today, right? And mallards from the heavens just sucking all the way down to the decoys, shooting them right, fluttering over the decoys, just like our hunt today. I hope the video does that justice, how those big flocks were just right there.
Yeah.
And that, like, gave me the bug. And, dude, I haven't been able to scratch that itch enough since. Like, it's just been the thing that's consumed me for years. I went to college at South Dakota State University because the duck hunting there was so good. I was a hunting guide in college. I started my own creative agency, like, with the intention of being the best damn waterfowl film crew out there.
Mm.
Like, it's just been my thing. So
yeah, you have a knack. I could tell you had a knack for it and didn't realize that you had experience as a photographer, as a producer, all these different things. What are some of the highlights of that experience, and how did that benefit you as a duck hunter?
Yeah, man, I would say that you've seen it, right? Like, there's hunting and then there's filming.
Yes.
They're different things. They're not the same thing.
They're not at all.
And
we actually hunted today, which is great.
Yeah. And hunting and filming are just not always in sync together.
Yeah.
And
well, you knew how to control that. That's why, that's what I appreciate, because I wouldn't have known how to position that or do that. But you were putting him, like, we had Phil Craft's media crew out there, Julian and Jose, and you were directing them. And I'm like, oh, we could actually hunt, and we're being filmed without impeding it.
Right. Yeah. And that's it right there. Like, that's the best way to put it, is we, having experience as a producer, you know, I've like, not just being a duck hunter, but I've produced a lot of TV, you know, well over 100 episodes of stuff. And what that taught me is how to, like, step back and see the whole picture and the whole storyline, and also the things you appreciate about the hunt and the things you appreciate as a duck hunter while you're out there. And I think that being a producer and trying to see storyline, trying to see how to tell a story well, how to write the story while you're out there, actually made me, as a duck hunter, a more satisfied, a more maybe just a little bit more nostalgic, like, maybe not quite so kill hungry, maybe not quite so all about, like, let's put a bunch of ducks on straps all the time. You know, when I was a hunting guide, that's the mission, right? Like, what your goal is as a hunting guide is to put a bunch of ducks on the ground for your clients.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose the respect for, like, the whole process as much. But then when you get back to the storytelling side, it goes the other way, right? It's like, find the pleasure in the little things becomes part of, like, what you see as a storyteller and a producer. And so I think it's made me just a more fulfilled duck hunter, I guess, because, like, today when I was guiding, I would have been like, today's a fine day, like, nothing great. Like, I wouldn't have gone home overwhelmingly pumped about today.
Yeah.
But as now, just like a duck hunter, like, just a straight up guy that loves duck hunting and loves telling the story of duck hunting, I was freaking stoked about today.
Yeah.
Everyone was smiles when we left. That's enough for me.
My face hurts still from just smiling. And it's, what's crazy is what I didn't, I mean, I saw it in the imagery, all the fowl, all the water, all the reeds, the boats. And what I've heard is from a lot of people is like, that part of it sucks. And that's like the dirty part. But I think those are outside perspectives, because I was warm the whole day. But what was cool about the whole experience was it's a natural habitat that's very different than, you know, that bull elk that I bagged in Sawtooth in Idaho is a very different experience than waterfowl.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. It was almost majestic, man. The snow was like falling in slow motion.
Oh, it was gorgeous.
The ice was breaking. Seeing the dog run around. The reeds. It was almost like the whole thing was a high dynamic range. It was just like this very saturated and beautiful thing. And then what I noticed, and you had brought it up, was the rapport and the friendships and the conversations that you build in a duck blind are just so amazing. And that's what attracted me to it, because, man, I want to raise my babies. It's hard for me to take my kids. They're 3. It's hard for me to take my kids on any hunts, but at the age of 4 or 5, I could potentially put them in the blind with me and then be part of that process.
Yep, totally. Yeah, that is, there's so much awesomeness there. So one thing about the beauty of the whole environment, right, is a swamp, or, you know, let's talk specifically the Salt Lake where we were today.
Yeah.
To a non-duck hunter, it's a stinky lake, right? You can't go fish on it. Like, you can't do any. It serves no purpose to just another person living in Salt Lake.
True. Yeah.
But and you hear people complain all the time about how it's a stinky bastard, right? But to a duck hunter, it's like one of the most beautiful places on earth. And it's because, as a duck hunter, you have this different respect for what that marshy, that sulfur smell of a marsh, right?
Mm-hmm.
That fermenting mud. That smell as a duck hunter means something different than a normal person, because you see the whole ecosystem. You see what that means for vegetation, what that means for food sources, what that means for migration. We saw today a very important body of water, one of the most important in the entire United States, and especially the Pacific Flyway. We saw a lake that serves really not that much purpose overall to Utah, or to a lot of the country as a whole, but to ducks and to what it does for migratory birds, it's like you can't overstate how important it
Oh
is.
wow, yeah.
And yeah, the beauty of that dynamic, right? The Phragmites and the reeds and the mud and the ice. Those things independently, maybe not that beautiful, but when you see them in the context of being out duck hunting, they're just freaking cool.
It's epic.
And then, like you said, one of the things that's so different about duck hunting than most types of hunting is the social side of it. That you get to be there with other people enjoying those moments, rather than, don't get me wrong, I respect the hell out of archery whitetail hunters, because they hang in that tree for 30 days chasing one buck, And I grew up around that, growing up in Iowa. But like that's not a social experience.
Yeah.
You're on your own doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But today we're laughing, we're chatting,
It's
we're
fun.
telling stories. And I maybe that's why I fell in love with it. Like doing it with my dad and doing it with my grandpa and my uncle was like, I got to hear their stories as a kid in the duck blind, and I wasn't going to hear those stories any other way of hunting. Wasn't going to hear those stories while we're whitetail hunting or while we're pheasant hunting. You hear them waiting for ducks to fly in a blind.
I'm enthralled with conservation as a part of all elements of hunting, and I would categorize myself as a hunter. I think in all aspects. I grew up as an angler, but my dad wasn't catching, releasing, fishing fish.
Yeah.
We were eating fish, and a lot of it we were eating fish because he had to subsidize. I think because the economics weren't working in his favor, we just weren't making a lot of money, and so he's like, "Man, if I go fishing on Friday, we can catch catfish. We could eat all weekend,
right?
Save some money." And so we did a lot of that, and
fishing's entry level cheap.
Yeah, it
right?
is.
Like
It
especially
absolutely.
catfish fishing.
It is. So I grew up on all that, and then had a whole bunch of opportunities to hunt early on, and then the war got in the way, and then that career after me. Now I'm all into it, and conservation, especially for the waterfowl, is super important. And I don't think a lot of people understand. Like, a lot of people are starting to get educated because of Ranella, because Joe Rogan's hunting now and he's talking about it. When it comes to elk, especially elk, whitetail, and big game, but I haven't heard anybody kind of contextualize like, hey, this is the reason waterfowl hunting and conservation is so important. And even from the stamp today, like I was like, wait, I gotta have a stamp. Oh, it's an actual stamp, and I gotta sign that.
$25 stamp.
So weird. And then, what's my limit? 7. Oh, I could do 7 a day. Yeah, and there's certain things. Can you lay it out, the education for why hunting birds, fowl, is so important?
Yeah, totally. Like very few groups of people in the conservation world can lay claim to a success story as much as duck hunters. I mean, duck hunters did so much for all conservation, especially waterfowl, of course. So ultimately what happened is late 1800s, you had market hunting in the United States. You were allowed to go kill bison, ducks, deer, bear, whatever, and sell it.
Oh, wow.
And, that was boy, I mean, to think of like how much life got taken in such a short amount of time, because that was a way for settlers and people settling the West to make money. That was a way as they marched across the United States for them to ultimately supplement themselves and make homestead as they traveled across this country. And that's the legends of Crockett and Boone and all that. That comes from market hunting, right? And so going into the late 1800s, early 1900s, you have market hunting of waterfowl starts it goes from that it exists to leaps and bounds technologically advanced, because they built what were called punt guns, which were these giant, they're cannons. They're cannons they're shooting at ducks that shoot, a pound and a half of shot of BBs at a time.
So scattering.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine if you were shooting at today's ducks?
Oh, it took out whole flocks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you had punt guns, and then on top of that, all of a sudden now pump shotguns as well developed, and guys legally allowed to shoot pretty much as many as they want.
There's no limitation.
There's no limitation, and they can go, and all of a sudden now they can feed their family off of taking these ducks to the market and selling them,
Wow.
And then you specifically had like kind of the last thing that really was the nail in the coffin for most of North America's waterfowl at the time was the canvasback, the canvasback is a diver duck. It's a big, beautiful duck, as big as a mallard, if not bigger. Very regal, gorgeous duck, and they were considered the best eating of like any bird. And so canvasbacks were selling for what ended up being like $100 a plate in New York and Chicago restaurants and London restaurants. They were getting shipped all over the world out of the East Coast. And guys saw an opportunity to make a killing on them, and so they were just wiping out whole flocks. And you went from the canvasback being a very prevalent North American bird to like this thing's on the brink of extinction if we don't stop.
Wow.
And luckily there was not just market hunters, but there was also outdoorsmen. There was also people who hunted for like the sake of loving hunting, for sake of feeding just their family, right? And sportsmen kind of stood up and said enough is enough. Like, we need rules and regulations around killing waterfowl. And kind of the first thing to go was market hunting. And then it went beyond that. They're like, okay, we can't bait for waterfowl. We can't, you can only shoot 3 shots, right? Is one of the rules.
I didn't realize till this morning
where
my gun,
my
Benelli wouldn't load a 4th round. I was like, I don't understand why the gun would only have 3. And I was like, oh yeah, you're limited to 3.
Yep.
Oh, okay, I get it now.
Yep. And rules like that kind of set in place a standard for the preservation of ducks and preservation of our waterfowl population in North America. And then the kind of last awesome step to that was the duck stamp, which the duck stamp was a way to fund waterfowl-specific habitat, where waterfowl hunters said, you know what, we need to fund waterfowl habitat and preserve waterfowl habitat as hunters if we want to continue to have ducks to hunt. And I mean, it's been like one of the best conservation success stories ever. And a lot of the ground that gets bought with duck stamp dollars is in like the Dakotas and kind of what we call the prairie pothole region, which is like where most of the ducks nest is the prairie, the Great Plains. And all kinds of wildlife benefit from it, right? Even fish. Like fish and deer and pheasants, you name it. Like, so much wildlife benefit. And it's this tricky situation of, man, like, I know I face this dilemma in my own mind of, like, individual sovereignty and freedom to do with your land as you see fit, combined also with, like, also our need to look into the future and not be short-sighted and, like, just shoot all the ducks or all the bison or whatever, all the deer. Right now, in this moment.
Save it for our kids.
Correct.
Kids. Yeah.
And the it sucks that the duck stamp kind of has to be a federal mandate in the way it is. It's too bad that all duck hunters just didn't see it as this voluntary thing they should do. But it is a successful one, right? Like,
so that stamp that I signed today
is federal.
Is a federal mandate for a day of hunting. You have to have a stamp?
Not a day, a season. Every year. Yeah.
So that only costs
$25.
$25.
And you buy a new federal duck stamp every year, yeah.
Oh, so that's awesome. That's kind of smart.
It's really cool,
it's like
man.
It's a tax stamp.
It's a tax stamp. Yeah.
But it all goes towards
it's what you pay. It's what you pay to get a silencer.
Yeah.
But it goes to duck habitat specifically, duck nesting habitat.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool story. And golly, man, I mean, look how many ducks we saw today, and you can't help but wonder, like, the Salt Lake would have been ripe for punt gunning because it's this big, nice open flat of water where you could shoot a bunch of ducks at once with this big punt gun.
Like, we leave no ducks for anybody else because we would have killed them all today.
Right.
So when it comes to your experiences in hunting duck, I mean, you've hunted all over the country.
Yeah.
And what I've recognized, which is it's not like that, I don't think, with big game, is the process. Like, I have a belly right now full of duck. I'm cleaning it up with a nice wine.
Mm-hmm.
And we went from this morning to going, hey, let's hunt. We did the whole thing. Like, all the shakeout of the kit. We did the putting out the blind, talking through stuff, shooting duck, and coming back, processing the meal, and then eating it, feeding my family upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, man, I don't think there's anything else like it. Like, I don't like, if I go elk hunting, man, that's a weak process for me.
Yeah.
Because
totally.
I'll get the deer, I'll get the elk. I want to process it. This last one I processed myself. And just going through that is a arduous process. And, oh, by the way, it's not very communal. It's like,
right.
You could try to make it communal, but it's not. Like, we could sit around and pluck feathers. We did upstairs and have conversations.
You're talking the whole time you're doing it.
It's just, I don't know. There's something very unique about the process. It almost reminds me of the good times I had with my old man fishing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great time, and I love it, man. I had a great time. When you look at all the places that you've been, what are some significant places in your mind that stand out as whether it's states or locations for duck hunting?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's all about what it is that you want to accomplish with your duck hunting and, like, the method of how you want to duck hunt, right? So even starting looking at just Salt Lake, you have how we hunted today out of a mud boat, relatively close to the boat ramp, honestly, like, not that much intense work or money involved. I mean, don't get me wrong, expensive boats, but you could have even walked to where we hunted.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
On the contrary, there was also guys out on the main Salt Lake today hunting in $90,000 airboats that ran 10 miles from shore to do so. And that's like a whole nother process and a whole nother experience than what we experience. So I think that's part of, like, where is good and what kind of experience you're going for. Salt Lake's one of the coolest places to duck hunt. It's a great place to duck hunt. You can have success relatively affordably here if you're willing to put in the work of walking your ass out a long ways.
Yeah.
Other places that are awesome. Texas is one of the best dang states to duck hunt.
Really? I'm getting excited now because I got a lot of time in Texas next year.
Yeah, especially like coastal Texas. Because all along the Gulf Coast you have a bunch of rice fields, you have a bunch of national wildlife refuges that preserve the coast and preserve all that marsh habitat. Texas is number 2, I think, for most ducks harvested of any state. So,
wow.
Yeah, Texas is a great place.
Texas?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because a lot of ducks, kind of what we saw here, where you have ducks coming to the Salt Lake to kind of winter, right?
Yeah.
They're going to spend as much time here this winter as they can. But as long as the lake stays open, there will be ducks here, right? Texas is that for the Central Flyway. So the country's split into 4 flyways: Pacific Flyway, which we're in here, then Central Flyway, Mississippi Flyway, and Atlantic Flyway. And the Central Flyway funnels a lot of its ducks to coastal Texas, is where they kind of go to spend their winter. And
these are migration corridors?
Yeah. So it's important to always think about that these ducks, while like right now I'm sure they're banging them up in Texas right now, there won't be a duck in sight 6 months from now. All those ducks in coastal Texas right now will be up in Saskatchewan, North Dakota, South Dakota come June. And that's where they'll nest, and then they'll fly back down. Wow. And so, yeah, Texas is like awesome. The hard part about Texas can be it's such a private land state. Like it can be hard to freelance, but you just kind of got to go to the coast. Or, I tell people all the time, like, you got to just be willing to knock on doors. You go drive around a bunch of Texas ranches and see a pond with 50 ducks on it. Chances are that rancher doesn't even know there's ducks on it. He's like, yeah, sure, go shoot them. Don't shoot the Neil guy. Don't shoot the Hexas dude.
Yeah, for sure. That's actually a really good point.
But yeah,
don't shoot the zebras.
Go ahead, shoot the ducks. I don't care. Like, what do you want to go hunting ducks for?
Yeah.
Arkansas is always considered like the Mecca. Arkansas.
Is that the Ozarks and the water?
So the eastern part of Arkansas, so Little Rock to the east, is called the Delta.
Because all the rice paddies and stuff.
All the rice. Yeah, all the rice, all the rivers that flood through there, the Cache, the White, the Black, pretty much the old floodplain in the Mississippi. Through there is, and so that's a good point of talking about what it is you want to accomplish, right? If you want to go to Arkansas, a lot of that's private land or very heavily pressured public land, right? There's so many people that go to duck hunt Arkansas every year, like a lot of pressure. I was telling you earlier about, there's duck clubs spending literally millions of dollars on diesel fuel just to fill those rice fields and timber to hunt ducks, right? And so, you're not going to get to go hunt a spot like that. But then if you have a canoe and go to the rice lakes of northern Minnesota in September or October, like chances are you're going to shoot some ducks, and you can do it super cheap. So, I think places like Arkansas and Texas, Utah, honestly, Washington's phenomenal duck hunting, North Dakota, Minnesota,
all over.
Yeah,
where there's rain and water and ponds.
Yeah, if you can find water and agriculture in the same spot, you're gonna start finding some ducks.
Black Rifle Coffee Company set out on a mission to make the best cup of coffee that's ever hit your mug. The dream was to sell enough premium coffee to be able to build a support network of veterans, first responders, and law enforcement. Thanks to your support, all that dream has become a reality. Black Rifle Coffee is roasted by a veteran-led team of brilliant coffee graders here in the United States who work tirelessly to roast and bag the highest quality coffee right here in America. The coffee is truly one of a kind, but it's your support that gets the gear, funding, and supplies into the hands of those on our front lines. This year alone, your support has helped BRCC expand our team of active duty service members, veterans, and veteran family members. Black Rifle was also able to donate over 120,000 bags of coffee to veterans and first responders in 2022, all thanks to you. You can purchase at blackriflecoffee.com. You can also find Black Rifle Coffee in grocery and convenience stores near you. Black Rifle Coffee, America's coffee.
For decades, buying a silencer has been difficult. But in 2005, Silencer Central set out to simplify the suppressor buying process. So what happens when you buy from Silencer Central? Well, they help you find the right silencer for you, they handle the paperwork so you don't have to, and they give you a free NFA gun trust so you can share your suppressor. Silencer Central allows you to pay while you wait, They make sure your purchase is carefully prepped, packaged, and protected until the moment you're approved. Once approved, they deliver it straight to your door. So whether you're planning your next hunt or putting together a range day, you'll enjoy every shot you take with Silencer Central, straight to your front door.
Let's talk about, I want to walk people through the process here because I'm curious my own right of understanding it, because all I did, I mean, I had the expertise of you, Dylan, and Tanner.
Yeah.
Dylan and Tanner are local guys who allowed us to kind of, they knew the area, so they kind of forward observed the different locations, and they had their own equipment to make it easier for us. They facilitated a lot of it, and big shout out to Tanner and Dylan, great guys. When I got into this, it was like, go get a shotgun, go get a $6 duck call. And that was really what I brought to the table. But there's a whole bunch of equipment and different things that you could do. Let's start off with the basics of how do you get a hunting tag or stamp, or what is it called? A
federal duck stamp. Yeah.
Yeah. There's what is that dip number?
Oh, the HIP. Yeah.
The HIP number.
Yeah.
What's the process of getting started as far as the administrative side?
Okay, fair. So whatever state you're living in, you'll either have a dedicated small game license that covers waterfowl, or a dedicated like waterfowl license on your whatever state administration website you have. And then you'll, in addition to that waterfowl license in your state, you'll also need a federal duck stamp, which you can buy at any post office.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's an actual stamp at the post office. Yep.
So cool.
It's just going to be a little more expensive than your normal stamp.
Yeah, because it's a stamp on a piece of paper or whatever.
Yeah, and it's $25 instead of whatever stamps are nowadays, 62 cents. And then you have to have what's called the HIP. A lot of states, that's rolled in when you buy your waterfowl license on the website. But what the HIP is a harvest information program. And they pretty much ask you every year, like, did you hunt ducks last year? How many ducks did you shoot? Things like that. And HIP doesn't cost you anything usually, but you have to have it.
It's like a registered survey.
Yeah. It's a registered survey that you got to have for waterfowl hunting. So that's pretty much it from and some states have in copying the federal duck stamp, some states have a dedicated state duck stamp as well to fund duck habitat in their own state. But yeah, that covers you on waterfowl as far as the administrative side, as well as some specific regulations you have to know. You have to shoot steel shot, and you can't shoot lead. Or let me rephrase that. You have to shoot non-toxic shot. So you have to shoot steel, bismuth, or tungsten.
Yeah.
Those are all non-toxic.
So you're not throwing lead into the water.
Right. Because what was happening was waterfowl were eating lead and dying of lead poisoning, but also was the raptors, right? The eagles and the hawks were dying from eating birds that had lead in them.
Oh.
Because the eagles go eat the guts out of a duck and consume a bunch of lead. And then they go to the next duck, eat a bunch of the guts, consume a bunch of lead. And so you have to shoot non-toxic shot, and your gun can only hold 3 shells in it. You have to have we call it a duck plug, but pretty much a plug that restricts how many shells your shotgun can hold. And at that point, I think that's pretty much everything you really need to know administratively.
What about, so for the waterways, we use Onyx and for navigating and getting borders and boundaries. There was the name of the conservation area that we were hunting said something like W something or
it was a waterfowl management area. WMA. Yeah, I can't ever overstate how much every person should have Onyx. And not just hunters, honestly. Like every person that wants to know where they stand at any given point, whether you're on public or private, you should have Onyx.
Because it shows the boundaries.
Right. Shows all the boundaries and shows landowners and even like hikers, right? Like I feel like even just people that go hiking should have Onyx because they at least know if they're on national forest ground or whatever they're standing on.
And do you look? What's the tactic there for like if you go on Onyx and then you're trying to find different spots? Are you looking for the WMA or whatever?
Right. So how I always kind of treat Onyx is I'm either looking for I'm looking at satellite imagery first, right? I'm looking for shallow water, or I'm looking for water next to agriculture. So if I see like shallow, marshy looking stuff, naturally probably going to be some ducks hanging around there. And then water near agriculture, ducks and geese will roost on water and then fly into cornfields, bean fields, wheat fields to eat. So if I find either of those options a place, it's already like now it's on my hit list of places I'm interested in. And then there it becomes looking for public land, right? That public land might be BLM or it might be state park in some states. It might be, it can be anything. But if it shows that it's public and it kind of like meets the requirements for what I picture as ducky habitat, then I'm going to go drive and check it out.
But it's not like a deer tag where you have to shoot a specific area or zone.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, most of the time you're not shooting a specific zone unless, that's a good point. There are some states, let's say Missouri, for example, where there's a north zone and a south zone in Missouri. So the season dates are just a little different depending on where you're at in Missouri, because northern Missouri freezes up earlier than southern Missouri. Actually, I think there's a north, central, south in Missouri, but whatever. So it is important to notice on there like what zone you're in when you're hunting and what those dates of the year are to make sure you're in legal hunting season. But
it's all state to state too, right?
Right. Yeah.
What is the average hunting season for duck in America?
So it goes by flyway. That comes back to those same 4 flyways we're talking about.
Oh yeah.
Atlantic flyway, I think, is right now at a 60-day season. Might be 45. Mississippi flyway 60 days. Central flyway is 74 days, and then Western Central flyway is like 90 days, and then Pacific flyway I think is a 108-day waterfowl season. Yeah, in Salt Lake you can hunt ducks a long time.
Yeah,
you can hunt
into February, right?
Till January, like late January.
Late January.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So you can hunt ducks a long time in the West Coast.
That's awesome. So if you're looking to get set up for hunting waterfowl strategically, fill in the freezer, you can set it up to where you could extend your season by going to different
states and flyways. Yeah. Even like, that's a great point. In North Dakota and South Dakota, duck season starts like September 27th, 28th, the last Saturday of September every year. And then ends by first week of December. But, Arkansas, their duck season doesn't even open till Thanksgiving and then runs till January 31st.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I spend so much time waterfowl hunting, is because I can actually go hunt August Canada geese. I can hunt Canada geese in August in South Dakota or North Dakota. Start hunting ducks in September, and then hunt all the way till end of January, and then start hunting snow geese in February and hunt those till end of April by following states. So I can hunt waterfowl for 9 months of the 12 months.
Wow.
If by being strategic with like state and species.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about gear specific stuff. Like when I went to go get a shotgun, I think I texted you and was like, hey, I'm going to get a Benelli or whatever. I went into the store, I went to Sportsman's Warehouse and said, hey, I'm getting into local hunting. And they're like, what's the best shotgun? They're like, well, this Benelli is about top of the line. What shotgun are the specs? And then what do you recommend as far as the best shotgun that you use?
Yeah. So 12 gauge Like, just do it. Just buy a 12 gauge, especially with how hard it is to get ammo these days in, like, off calibers. Like, the guys I know that shoot a 20 gauge right now are having a hard time getting shells. So
Wow.
just buy a 12 gauge. Needs to shoot 3-inch shells at the bare minimum. I always shoot, not always, but most of the time I shoot a 3-inch shell with number 2 shot steel, and that will cover you most of the time on geese and ducks. You really don't have to shoot much else.
So the 3 inches is the
length of the
length
shell.
of the shell.
Yeah, in the chamber of the shotgun.
Yep. And then the shot is sized based off of a number, right?
Yeah, number and letters. So the higher the number, the smaller the BB. So number 8 shot is really tiny pellets. Number 1 shot is bigger pellets. And then it turns to letters after that. BB, BBB, and then you get into like FT and buckshot is like how it gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
BB and BBB you would shoot for Canada geese. You would never shoot that really at ducks. But yeah, so as far as, so that's kind of what shotgun I'd say. Just get yourself a 12 gauge 3-inch shotgun. Brands, you can't go wrong with Benelli and Beretta. I mean, those two they're mentioned all the time for a reason. They're great shotguns.
Yeah.
And Franke and Stoger are great. And honestly, the shotgun I was shooting today is a Weatherby, and it's pretty much internally, it's an inertia system. It's internally pretty much a Benelli M2 at a discount. I mean, it's a great shotgun, and I've liked shooting that shotgun. So, one other shotgun that's really a great shotgun is the Winchester SX4 is a good shotgun.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of my list of like, if you go with a Benelli or Beretta and budget's not a problem, great shotguns. The Beretta A400's fantastic. And then if you're on a budget, look at the Weatherby, the Franke, and the Stoger.
Talk to me about the barrel length and then this choke system. Like I am new. Like the guy was straight up Sportsman's, is like, great guy, by the way. Sportsman's up in Provo, which is a great place to like get education from guys, because most of the guys hunt. And he opens up this case and he goes, listen, Benelli, which is an Italian company, they're a little different on their chokes and systems. And he walks me through all these different chokes. I'm like, dude, I have what you just told me, and I forgot everything you just said, because it's so foreign to
language.
Me. It's foreign.
Yeah, a little different than talking suppressors.
Yeah, for sure. It's completely. I had a hard time today. Like, I know you guys. I mean, the camera caught it mostly, but just there's a whole bunch of different things. Like the gate closes because it doesn't want you to. What is it called?
Float a fourth.
Yeah, you don't want to float a fourth round.
Yeah, it doesn't want you to be able to sneak a fourth round.
Yeah,
so they've got a locking mechanism.
Yeah, so then you have to do like some series of clicks off of, so it's not like a Benelli M4 or M1 that I'm used to using. So it was pretty difficult. But even when I showed up with the choke today, I had no idea if that was the right choke. Yeah. And thank God it just was, because I didn't bring the box that was in the case when I bought the gun. What are the different chokes, and what does that mean?
Okay, so choking is the tightening down of the wad and the pellets as they leave the barrel. So
like a tighter group, pattern.
Group, correct. Yep. So it's tightening or loosening that pattern. Kind of an increment from widest pattern, biggest pattern, to tightest pattern. You would have like a skeet choke, then you would have improved cylinder, then modified, then full, and then extra full. And ultimately what you're doing, right, is it's kind of up to the shooter. And also there's a big conversation to be had around that, around efficacy and your ability to efficiently kill. An improved cylinder, you're throwing a very wide pattern, but there's going to be gaps in that pattern, right? Because there's no more BBs. So if you're throwing 144 pellets at a real wide pattern, that you might only hit the duck with one pellet if he's pretty far. If he's real close, sure, it's going to be tighter, right? Because that thing's a cone as it leaves that shotgun.
Yeah.
Versus if you're taking pretty far shots, let's say 40-yard shots, you're going to want a real tight pattern when it leaves your barrel, because ultimately it needs to be, still a pretty tight grouping by the time it finally gets to that duck. So, and then last part of that is, an inexperienced shooter, someone that's not shooting a lot of shotgun and not shooting a lot of birds, might need the handicap of that wider pattern to just make sure they hit something. And someone with a lot more experience, that aim small, miss small, right? They're gonna shoot a tighter choke because they know they're capable of doing that.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, personally, I try to shoot a really tight choke because I don't want to wound birds. And if I just, I wounded and lost one today, and it freaking pissed me off because I shouldn't have even shot at that bird. I knew he was kind of sneaking out the back door on me, and it was.
That's the one you went and tried to find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And a tight pattern usually can help me out in that situation, where even if I make a bad decision, I got enough pellets on target that bird falls dead or wounded enough to where the dog's going to get it. And I think that, here's an interesting stat. The estimates are anywhere from 15 to 40% of their wound loss mortality a year in waterfowl. So if the country shoots 10 million ducks a year as a hunting populace, if we kill 10 million ducks a year, anywhere from 1.5 million to 4 million ducks are going wounded and dying in the weeds every year. And I think
That's a lot. Yeah.
it's a lot. And I think part of that is because you get 1 or 2 BBs in it instead of 7, right? You get 1 BB in the guts that doesn't drop it right there, but then he flies out to the lake and dies.
Yeah.
And so
it's a waste.
Yeah. So I always try to tell people that they should try to shoot a tighter choke, just to, make sure you either miss or you kill it clean, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. I didn't realize it until we were cleaning the duck, and I've had this with pheasant and other types of animal, and I kind of comprehend this, but seeing it in real time, both in the hunt and then post when we're processing the animal, when you hit it, it has to be a certain set distance, because if you hit it too close, you'll decimate that bird. If you hit it too far, you'll wound the bird, right?
Right.
So it's like whatever that choke is and putting that range at, there's an optimal zone where you can hit it.
Yep.
And you did a really good job at helping me get dialed into that zone, because I started calibrating, you're like, no, that's too far. And I was like, okay, that's like 50 plus yards. And you're like, oh, hit them now. And then I was hitting them. I remember I hit one real close.
Yeah, you did.
And it was like, boosh.
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, wow, okay. And then it was like a 30 to 40 yard range that was like kind of a perfect little window, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that range was likely the majority that we hit that only had 1 to 2 BBs in them.
Yeah.
And it helped us process them better. But it was an ethical kill.
Right.
Even some of the ones that were where you're like, ooh, it hit, it's not completely dead. It died fast. It wasn't bad. Have you found that optimal window based on the chokes and the experience? How have you dialed that in?
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the reason we have decoys, right? It's like we're running air traffic control for trying to you saw where I had the spinners?
Yeah.
Right? The spinners is that distance for how we were choked. If those ducks are trying to land with the spinning wing decoys, which for people that aren't familiar, spinning wing decoy is a duck on a pole with exactly what it sounds like, rotating wings that looks like a duck landing. So I have those kind of set where I see as our optimal distance. If a teal is trying to land with those spinning wing decoys, I see that teal as like the perfect killing distance, which was about 30 yards, I'd say.
Yeah.
25 to 30, you know, depending kind of on those spinners. And so that is for how we were choked, right? We were choked pretty tight. I see that as like that was our kind of money zone of effective killing. But yeah, it's all about how you choke. You know, if a guy's shooting a improved cylinder with a 20 gauge, you know, a small bore shotgun, he wants them at 10 yards. You know, he wants them right in his face.
Yeah, like
a guy,
pheasant,
right? A guy shooting a 10 gauge with, you know, the 2 ounces a shot and a full choke, man, he's smoking them at 50. So yeah.
So there's a balance there.
Yeah, there is.
But 12 gauge is the recommendation for you.
Yeah, 12 gauge for sure, and you know, and then like if you're shooting a modified choke, you know, a modified to a full, you want those birds at 25, 30 yards, and you should be killing them consistently. Like that should be kind of a sweet zone to be in.
Let's talk before we go into like your recommendation for like the kit list. Let's talk about gear, because I noticed you had, I mean, this is like cherry day one, right? Which I'm not afraid to admit. Like this is the reason why I brought Sean in, because he's the expert. But I show up and I'm in like sick elk backcountry hunting stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I got muck boots on, and everybody's in waders, and I'm like, and I got waders for fly fishing, but I'm like, oh man. Like,
yeah, I didn't even think about telling you. It was like just like one of those things that slips the mind, you know.
I didn't even think about it. Then boy, it makes sense. I'm like, oh my god, why didn't I even think it's waders? You got to have waders on.
Yeah.
Can you walk me from like, I don't know, head to toe and the basics of what you should have, and then what you actually use?
Okay. Yeah. First off, good pair of wool socks, because when you're standing in that cold water and cold mud, like you gotta have some good wool socks on. Waders, the ones that I was wearing today aren't out yet. The world knows about them. They're the First Light waders. Those will be out next year.
Those are sexy.
Yeah, they're sweet awesome. Waders.
Yeah.
Yep. The First Light waders are really sweet. Honestly, Sims waders are great. Sitka waders are great.
Got Sims waders,
there's a lot of good waders on the market now. And if you're balling on a budget, good cheap pair of neoprenes from the farm store.
Do they have to be, like, I got fly fishing waders. Can I use those?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, the hard part with fly fishing, you can totally pull it off. I did for a lot of years. The hard part just gets to be your foot management, like keeping your feet warm in fly fishing waders, because you're doing that water right up to that stocking foot.
Yeah,
can be cold because there's no air gap between your foot, right, and that cold water. You're not creating that warm air bubble around the foot. Versus with a boot foot, like I was wearing a heavily insulated boot foot, my feet were totally warm.
Which is designed for foul.
Okay.
Yep.
And as like under my wader, those waders are an uninsulated. They're insulated boot, uninsulated rest of you. I'm wearing like a wool base layer, long johns, and then a wool pant, and then like a tough pant like this, just a thin uninsulated pant. Then moving up from there, I was wearing wool next to skin, like a light wool, and then I was wearing a heavy merino wool base layer next. I was wearing First Light stuff, but there's a lot of great stuff out there. I mean, I like the First Light stuff. Sitka makes great stuff. I wore Sitka for years. Ducksworth makes great stuff. I mean, there's really a lot of good apparel companies.
In all budget ranges.
Nowadays. And then past that thick merino layer, I was wearing honestly this same thing as this vest, but in a jacket form. It's a Berber fleece with like a almost Carhartt material on the outside.
Yeah.
And I got a little hot in that. It was a little too much.
Because your waders go above, like suspenders.
Yeah, waders come up to, bottom of my arm. Wow. So I was a little clammy in that today. It was a
Yeah.
little too much. We were pretty active.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of like what you really need is you need dang good pair of socks, waders, and then I just really do think like wool is the best for waterfowling because you stay warm when you're wet with wool. And then, try to avoid cotton.
Cotton kills.
Cotton,
Yeah.
Cotton's rough, man, especially when you're wet all the time waterfowling. And then, some spinning wing decoys and a lanyard with what you saw on my lanyard was duck call, goose call, a duck whistle, and then a remote control that controlled my spinning wing decoys. And that covers you pretty intensely.
So let's talk let's talk decoys because
Yeah.
when I went to Sportsman's, they had a whole bunch of boxes of decoys,
Yep.
and I assume the box or the type of decoy you get depends on the water that you're in, or are they universal? Because we put out
That's a good
we
point.
put out the geese one, and I was like, oh, are we trying to attract geese, or are we just trying to attract birds? Like,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so goose decoys are a good attractant of ducks, just because they're high visibility, right? Those things are black and white.
yeah,
And so from a long ways off, those ducks can kind of see those goose decoys. But they're meant more for visibility, right? And so I use actually a lot of goose decoys myself when I'm duck hunting, even though I'm hunting ducks.
yeah.
Now, I do set out duck decoys like we did today as well. As far as when you buy the decoys, what you're buying is price and realism, right? So at the top end of realism, but also expensive, you have a brand like Dakota Decoy, which is what I use, and they're the most realistic money can buy, but also pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But they're great.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of technology wrapped up in those decoys, like super lightweight plastic so when you have to walk in a long ways, you're not carrying so much weight.
Yeah.
Then on the bottom end, you have what are called like the green headgear hot buys, which are like the cheapest decoy made. They're very cheap. They still look like a duck. They're just, might not be as durable. They might not be as realistic. And so when you're buying decoys, you're buying in that range, right? Of like how much you care about realism versus price you're finding the equilibrium there. And then you're buying by species too, right? Now, generally, you don't have to like have the decoys that match the species you're hunting, but you might buy. This is a good thing to talk about. You notice we had those decoys behind us today,
Yeah.
and they were very black and white.
Yeah.
Those are bluebill decoys. Those are diver decoys. So we are buying a diver duck decoy like that, that was a bluebill. We're buying those with the intention of that they are a high-vis decoy that's going to attract divers. Because divers, how their vision works is divers actually are looking for specifically black, white, and red when they decoy. So we had diver decoys out specifically for the purpose of if divers came by. But then out in front of us, we had puddle duck decoys. So we had shovelers, widgeon, and teal, which are not necessarily as high vis, a lot more browns in those decoys, like brown colors, and they hang out in super shallow water like we were hunting. So those decoys made sense in front of us because that's what we were targeting.
And then geese offset.
And then geese kind of offset more just for visibility and attraction than actually
from a longer distance.
Right. Yep.
Because what's the ultimate objective for decoys as you put them out in front of you? I like how you lined out like you're getting them in distance to the blind to be able to shoot and engage. But what's the overall objective for having them out?
Yeah, that's a good point. We're trying to get them to land in front of us, and we want to use how birds sit in nature to mimic that and direct them accordingly. So those geese kind of were set on land, right? Because geese would have been standing on land today, like we're in that spot. And those were a standing goose silhouette. So that kind of made sense for them to be over there standing on like what looks like solid ground. And then how the decoys are arranged, depending on the day and the hunt, ultimately what we're picturing is that other ducks see them and want to come land with them because they're seeing that there's either food there or a resting place or just safety in numbers.
Yeah.
And so that kind of always shifts by what habitat you're hunting, if it's cold or warm. Early in the season, your duck decoys might be really loose and scattered and not very many of them because it's nice out. And then late in the winter, birds huddle together real tight to stay warm. So your decoys might be all packed real tight together in almost a ball of massive decoys. So, but yeah, that's the goal, right? Is mimic whatever they would be looking like in nature and ultimately convince them that we are a real spread of decoys or of ducks.
Yeah, and then you want to bring them in to land, so you have shooting options of on the infill when they're landing, when they land and they're like sitting, or when they're taking off, right?
Right. Yeah. That's a funny thing that duck hunters take as like just known is, oh, you just shoot them as they're decoying, but like as they're coming in. But to non-duck hunters, it would make sense, well, just let them all land first, then start shooting them.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense that we shoot them when they're in the air,
Yeah.
rather than letting them land. Like, I can't
Because
explain.
they bail
Right.
so hardcore, which surprised me. I was like, holy crap, these guys are like
acrobats,
mavericks of like the top guns of the bird.
Yeah,
and they're just, it literally, you could see some of them dodge the pellets as they were coming.
They're dipping like,
because they're like, oh God. And they're so smart and intelligent. It's almost like they see it as a predator
fast.
And they're moving around the pellets.
Yeah, it's pretty intense how fast they are and how quick those little teal maneuver, man. I mean, you saw it when they would bunch up behind us to come over us. All of a sudden they go.
Oh yeah.
They're flipping, as they come
so
by.
So crazy.
They're a little.
So beautiful though.
Yeah.
So awesome.
But
when they land,
well,
it's easy.
Yeah, it's way easier when they land. So it makes no sense that we don't just let them land more. But for some reason, it's always been seen as like the sporty thing, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
I can't rationalize it. Like,
I see that.
I can't give it reason or logic, but it's just what you.
Yeah, it's like shooting big game when they're bedded. It never feels right to me.
Right.
It's like or like there's somebody bedded and then a hunter will call them just to get them to stand
up, and then that's why. Yeah, and it logically and rationally might not make that much sense.
Yeah.
But, it's where you like. That's what you do.
Yeah. Let's talk about the blind because I was so the whole blind thing I'd seen, and I'd seen people set up like the tents and watching Duck Dynasty and them doing the stuff, but it was super interesting to see the blind that we set up because we set that blind and then used natural foliage and camouflage to conceal ourselves. And it was super cool. I didn't even realize that was a thing because we used it nearly like we were using jute to tie in, and how we built that was based on like the terrain, and it was such a cool process. And I didn't even realize that's how it worked. I thought we were going to pop a tent, but that whole thing was really cool. I'm interested to understand, or for other people who are trying to understand, when you set up that. What are you trying to mask? Like, what are the specs and what is the natural advantages that a duck has over any other game? Eyes, their senses. What is it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Ducks have incredible vision, like unbelievable vision.
They're not smelling anything, really.
No. Yeah, they're using their eyesight, and you have to. I mean, just think about this, and this puts some context. Those ducks are flying how fast by us, but they all of a sudden see that spinning wing decoy and turn on a dime.
Yeah.
I mean, their vision's really good to be able to see that.
Way out, they did
Way out there. And so, yeah, their vision's incredible. They see red, green, blue spectrum. They also see ultraviolet spectrum. which we don't see. So they're seeing shades of colors
We
that we don't
see.
even know are colors.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is like they're seeing wavelengths that we don't even know how to recognize.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they have what's called this corneal streak in their eye, which gives them sharper vision in a portion of their eye. And then they also have, they're bad with depth perception, but they have almost like a wide angle lens view because they can see, it's like 300 degrees of their vision.
Yeah.
So it forces things that are even kind of far to look very close. So it's almost like having a zoom lens on top of increased sharpness, on top of increased color. Like they just have phenomenal vision. I actually wrote a really cool article about duck vision called The Truth About Duck Vision, if anyone wants to go look it up. And
Where's that at?
MeatEater website.
MeatEater.com?
Yeah, themeateater.com. Yep.
TheMeatEater.com. Okay.
Yep. And then the thing that you're trying to do with the blind is reduce anything that looks unnatural because they pick those things out
From the sky.
Right, from the sky. So even like, yeah, our camo helps us some, but with an elk it helps a ton, right? But with ducks, it's like, no, they see that blob there. They see colors that we're not seeing, right? The camo helps a little, but ultimately, like, they still know you're standing there. Versus if you're completely covered in a gilly of natural camouflage that matches your surroundings perfectly, then they just can't possibly know you're there. And so that's what you're really going for. What I like, when I'm, today was kind of a haphazard blind, honestly. If I had all the time in the world today, what we would have done is really dissected that whole brush pile, and we would have been engulfed in trees and brush so much that like we would hardly be able to see the ducks decoying. And then we would have grass sprinkled through. We would even have branches coming up over our back to cover us from behind so they can't see the back of our head as we turn and look. I mean, you would really go that far because it can come to that. When we're hunting geese or snow geese, we actually hide in pit blinds under the ground because they have such good vision. Like you are in a 6 foot deep hole looking through a tiny little slit 2 inches to hunt them because otherwise they're going to see you.
Wow.
Yeah. They have incredible vision.
That was super fun. That whole process was fun.
Yeah, it's like building forts.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Let's talk about we're closing out on an hour already, but let's talk about the retrieving aspect, because you had your dog, and I Black Rifle Coffee just released a documentary recently of a dog saving my life in Iraq who bit a suicide bomber. You guys can see that on Black Rifle Coffee's main YouTube channel. And I'm a big fan of dogs. Your dog, she was retrieving, and then the things that she was retrieving, I was like, if we didn't have her, we'd have to go out and get that?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, is a dog like a necessity here?
That's a good point. I hunted for a long time without a dog, and it was always a pain in my butt.
Yeah.
But, it's a balance of life and dog ownership. I traveled so much. As a TV producer, I was traveling 200 days, 220 days a year, all over the world. So I just really didn't have the capacity to own a dog at that time. That was, and also didn't have the time to train that dog properly. Yeah. Versus, now I kind of have the time. I had the time to train her this year and spent so much time with her. I'd say I spent 10 hours a week dedicated training her all summer long.
She was great.
Yeah, she did a good job. I was proud of her today. It made me happy.
Awesome.
Yeah. So dog's not a necessity, but it is a wonderful luxury. It's great to have a dog.
Some of them we dropped, I was like, ooh, that'd be complicated. And then even as we were shooting some of them, because there was so much going on, it was kind of hard to track where certain birds were. Mm-hmm. And if it was just the guys trying to track the birds, I mean, I can imagine some of those birds would get lost.
Yeah, but she had her nose, right?
Yeah, she
has
was
the
finding
ability
them.
to smelling them.
It was crazy. And I'm assuming there's a process and there's a specific breed that you want to go after as far as like the breeder.
Yeah,
is there
yeah.
Like, what's the history of your dog?
She's a British Lab from Southern Oak Kennels, which is like, to me, one of the premier premier British Lab kennels.
Southern Kennels.
Southern Oak Kennels. They're phenomenal. Okay. She's a great dog. They have great dogs. I've filmed and hunted over 30 some of their dogs now, and I've loved watching all of them. But there's a lot of good breeders. You do kind of get what you pay for. If you go get a $250 lab off the street, you might just get a house dog.
Yeah.
You go get something from a proven, reputable hunting, breeding kennel, you're going to probably get a dog with a lot of good instinct like she has. But, typically, like, just look for a kennel that advertises themselves as that they're breeding hunting labs, not lap dogs. Right?
Yeah.
There's a difference between a show lab and a dog really bred for its hunting prowess. But yeah, labs, Chesapeake Bay retrievers, some golden retrievers, kind of as duck dogs, like that's the breeds. Yeah, that's the breeds.
What's your favorite? Let's close out with what's your favorite duck call, and what's your favorite way to prepare and cook duck? Because I know we did a couple different things today, but what is your favorite call?
Yeah. As far as a call goes, there's a lot of phenomenal ones out there, like so many. Just to list off some of like my favorite brands, and then I'll say my specific one. RNT duck calls, great. Ducklander, Pacific calls. There's a new Phelps duck call that's coming out that's going to be great. There's a lot of great duck calls out there. Those are just a few. RNT is kind of the name in the game, has been for a long time. Rich in tone calls, and you can't go wrong with the RNT short barrel. It's a great duck call, and you can't go wrong with the Pacific calls, Ace or Deuces. Those are both great duck calls. And then as far as my favorite way to prepare duck, I just really encourage people to take the time to pluck some ducks and pluck the feathers off the breast to leave the skin on,
Which leaves the fat on the meat, right?
Leaves the fat on the meat, Otherwise, it's super lean meat. There's no fat in the meat.
Yeah.
The fat's on the outside in the skin. And, think about eating a rotisserie chicken and what that flavor is like versus eating a chicken breast.
Yeah.
That's
a good analogy.
Yeah. And that's the difference you're getting with duck is the duck breast is like your chicken breast, but man, that rotisserie duck would be freaking phenomenal if all that skin is still there and all that fat. And these ducks have so much fat. You saw some of those we cooked up tonight.
Yeah.
They're half inch of fat on them.
It was great with the fat.
Great with the fat on.
Made a big difference.
So I encourage you to pluck at least the breast. Just pluck the breast, and you'll see the value in plucking. And then sear it skin side down in a pan. Get that skin nice and crispy. Salt and pepper the heck out of it. Then flip it over to finish it. Or you can finish it in the oven. And then if you're feeling real adventurous, save that duck fat for duck fat potatoes, which we also did tonight, which is...
Those duck fat potatoes were amazing. I crushed everybody's. Like I started eating everybody's, digging out of the pan. We sent my media guy, John, home with some. Let's talk about your stuff, because you're thinking about or you're committed to starting a podcast.
Yeah, I'm going to start a podcast. Don't have a name for it yet, but I'm starting one. It'll be a waterfowl, like more oriented podcast. I won't just talk waterfowl, but that'll be what I want to talk to a lot of waterfowlers.
I'm excited about that, man, because I've actually, when you were on MeatEater stuff, those were the referenceable things that I could find on waterfowl. But there's not a lot out there.
No, there's really not.
There's not.
And I've seen that myself, that like a lot of the questions I get on, social media or email or whatever else, like they're really basic questions a lot of the time. And it does seem like there's room for a comprehensive source on waterfowl stuff.
Yeah.
And so, soon I'll be doing a waterfowl podcast, and I'm going to find somewhere just as a home for all things waterfowl.
Yeah.
I want to have somewhere that's a real dedicated home for every bit of education you can have, 101 level. Here's how to put decoy weights on decoys and set them in the water, and then get all the way 404 level and dissect drone photos of decoy spreads. That's something I really want to do, is have people send in photos of their decoy spreads, and I'll dissect what I would do different, what I like about their spread, what I don't, and get real detailed around, like, luckily for me, now we're just talking about 20 years of knowledge waterfowling, which
it's
and
a lot.
doing it a lot.
Yeah.
So
especially with as much passion as you have, man. I've never seen so many. I mean, I've seen a lot of passionate hunters, but nobody in the waterfowl world that's as passionate as you are. We're doing Fieldcraft Survival. My company is doing a potential migration off of locals into our own app, which would potentially be a landing site. So think about us potentially, because it could be a landing site for a lot of your content. I like the idea of long-form educational content on things like this, where there is no optimal window. It's like you're teaching to a standard, not to a time hack. And so it's like we're training to a standard here, guys. So if the standard takes 6 hours because we're going through something very detailed, and you could virtually learn that and then ask the questions and do the thing, that's the platform we're designing right now.
that's cool.
And it'd be really cool to have you on board. And I know we just filmed a cooking video with you.
Yeah.
That's pretty long form, so at a minimum, we'll have some of that stuff. Where can people go to find you right now in the current platforms that you have?
Yeah, in the moment, just go check me out on Instagram for the time being. Sean Weaver, DWC. Sean spelled SEAN. So that's SEANWEAVER DWC. Sean spelled the Irish way.
Yeah, I like this.
If the red beard didn't give it away.
Yeah, I know. I got some of that too. I got a little bit of that in me as well. Sean, I want to say thank you, man, for coming on the podcast.
That was a ton of fun.
It's rad,
This
man.
whole day was a freaking blast, man. We piled a lot of stuff into a day.
We
It was a
did,
good day.
and it's like that's the kind of the day that you want, because I feel like that's the kind of day that you feel like you earned it.
Yeah.
And we hit the rack tonight. It's like, oh man, what great memories, man. And It was a pleasure, man. It was
I can feel
amazing.
my contacts drying out, which means it was a good day.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I'm ready for bed. It was a good time, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. One last thing is we got to get you, like on How I Duck. Let's get you out in South Dakota or something next fall. It'd be
Yes.
fun. Yeah.
I'm already programming the calendar right now.
Cool.
I'm all about
Yeah,
it,
that'd
man.
be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, make sure you check out Sean's links down below. All the stuff that Sean's doing. Check out his Instagram, because once that podcast drops, I want you guys to know about it. I want to say, all you waterfowlers or people who are in the waterfowling community, make sure you guys leave your comments and feedback below, because that's what this is all about. It's like these are the positive things that we can concentrate our efforts on and come together, share that education, share that information, subscribe, hit the notification tab, all that good stuff. I appreciate you guys. Until next time. Thanks, guys.
That concludes today's training. Any questions? Woo! Drum titties, boy!